Well, hello all and welcome to Cyber Resilience at Scale with Hitachi Vantara and Veeam. Now, today's webinar is sponsored by Veeam and Hitachi Vantara, produced by Actual Tech Media, and my name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, Future B2B, and I am so happy that I get to be your moderator for this timely and all-important conversation. To me, what makes this so interesting is not just the two incredible speakers that we have here with us today, and I promise you all we are in for such a treat. It is also the nature of both resiliency and scalability, because things are moving so quickly and we're all just trying to keep up, right? We're trying to keep up with growing threats. We're trying to keep up with the world at large, which is constantly changing. And so it is so important to be able to both withstand and recover from an attack, but it is also important that all of your best laid plans and strategies are able to scale with your business growth and with the evolving nature of this ever-changing world, right? We're moving all the time. There are so many moving pieces, so many different layers and things to consider. So today we get to sit down with two industry-leading experts who are going to help us understand how we can protect our critical production workloads and data while, and this is important, also meeting our organizational needs for flexibility and, of course, cost-effective storage for all of your backups. All that and more coming at us very quickly here. But first, as we jump in, I am going to zip through a few housekeeping points that are going to help you get the most out of our conversation today because we have a lot to cover. So let's jump in. We're going to start out with a little bit of a guided tour of your audience console here. And I want to start out in the questions section because this is the most important part. The most important part of a fun and interactive conversation like this is all of you. So if you have those wonderful questions, those thought-provoking ideas, general thoughts on life, wonderings, we want to hear all of that from you. In fact, we are going to give that a little test run right now. So let's go down to our questions window. If you haven't already done so, say hi, say hello, give us a shout out. Hey, Ali, hey, Tomo, hey, Paul. I saw Gilbert and Zhang and Vrej and Morteza. We got a whole awesome crew with us. Keep those highs and hellos coming. Let us know how you're doing today. I want to hear from you all across the world. All right, so as we're going throughout our day today, you're going to get those questions in because our speakers are going to be watching those. They're going to be adjusting in real time, making sure that they're getting you the content that you want to hear. You're also going to use that questions window if you do have any tech problems. Knock on wood. Hopefully this doesn't come up today, but if the gremlins get in your system, here's the first thing you're going to try, a browser refresh. I promise a browser refresh is going to clear out most of those usual gremlins, but if they're really clinging on and that browser refresh doesn't work, you can post in that questions window. Let us know that you're having a little bit of trouble and we will be there to help you out. All right, so we started in the questions window. The next thing we're going to do is take one step over to the handouts tab, click in and start exploring. There are some incredible resources and takeaways that are going to really help you get the most out of our conversation when you're trying to recall all the exciting things that you're hearing from our speakers later on, because as much as we wish it would all stay there forever, sometimes we need that little memory jog, right? So open that handouts tab, make sure you've got those handouts downloaded and save them for after we wrap. Don't go too far just yet because we've got a lot of great stuff coming your way. Speaking of which, we also do have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Now, you do need to be here in live attendance in order to qualify to win that prize, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those T's and C's are, don't worry, I don't expect you to have those memorized. Head on back over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down, you will find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. All right, one last thing that I want to tell you about, and this one's pretty exciting because not only does asking a question today help bring up the whole excitement and conversation, and you get interactive with our incredible speakers who absolutely want to hear from you and be chatting with you throughout our day. But if all of that wasn't good enough, we also have a $50 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away to the best question asked across the entire webinar. We are going to review all the questions asked after we wrap up the webinar today. So even if your question does not get asked live, there is still a chance to win that $50 best question gift card. So get those questions in. All right, well, that is it. That is all the information we need to cover before we start here. I think it's about time that we get started on our day here because we have so much to get into, and I am so excited to introduce you all to our incredible expert presenters. As you can see, we have a shiny, dynamic duo here with us today. Rick Vanover, Veeam Product Strategy, Office of the CTO at Veeam, and David Green, Senior Vice President, Global Strategic Partnership at Hitachi Vantara. David, so excited to welcome you to the platform. Rick, welcome back. Always good to see you. I'm going to hand things off and let you take it away. Rick?
All right, Jess. I didn't know that it was such a great gift card program today, so we better be ready for the questions. You ready to jump into it, David?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
All right. So the resiliency conversation, David and I, in the really long history that Veeam has been in the business of resiliency and Hitachi Vantara in the business of, modern storage systems. The reality of the market right now of what we're seeing in terms of cyber threats, ransomware attacks. Want to highlight an interesting stat from the Veeam Ransomware Trends Report 2024. Basically, most organizations, 75%, had some sort of ransomware incident, including multiple, and then
Mhm.
25% didn't. And David, I like to say sometimes it's not so much. Um, I like to say that this green slice is the ones that just haven't had an incident yet. I mean, do you kind of
That's
agree with that?
I would fully agree with you with that one. That you can't rely on ignorance at this point in the game. A lot of people like to believe if I don't know it, I'm fine. Take that ostrich approach of putting the head down in the sand. And that's one of the reasons why we always recommend, do some form of compromise assessment to really find out what's going on inside the environment because you need to be aware of what's happening before it actually does, in fact, happen. And no doubt, when we get further down into the conversation, we start looking around how the storage infrastructure works, we can cover that piece. But you're absolutely right. That 25%, they need to be paying attention to this, truly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I grew up preparing for fire, flood, and blood type disasters, but the
I
reality
like
is,
that one. Fire, flood, and blood.
yeah. But the reality is today, cybersecurity incidents are the disaster I'm most likely having to deal with, right? So
Yeah.
let's take a look at what happens when those types of incidents do occur. Now, this is, I should really highlight, this is double blind research. The
Hmm.
respondents don't know that Veeam was asking, and Veeam doesn't know who was being asked. Okay, so this isn't a Veeam customer survey, this is raw market data. But the reality is, when we see organizations go through incidents, David, 18% of production data is at risk of being lost, and then just above half is being recoverable. So I think
Hmm.
that the numbers are that's kind of scary when you think about the digital transformation, the criticality of data. I don't like those odds.
No, I don't. And when you think about it as well, if the 18% that you're losing from a production perspective, how critical is that 18% to the business? Because at the end of the day, it takes nothing at this point in time to bring a business down. And the other thing that's percolating in my mind as I'm looking at the slide is what percentage of the companies would have taken the time to continuously test the data. So even though they may have done a good backup and the data may have been encrypted, how many of them actually tried to run some kind of test to see, can I actually recover this if I actually need it? And when I recover it, is it exactly what I require? That would be an interesting statistic to put up there if we could get it.
That's a good feed for kind of as we evolve some of the research we have, David. But I want to highlight what you said about testing, practicing. I'm a American football person, unapologetically a fan. And if you ever look at like teams, they practice a lot the trick plays. Or if you go
Yeah.
to law enforcement, they practice
Mhm.
the really tough things. And those are the things that matter when it comes to responding to an incident. So to I have my one-liners today, friends. I got another one here. I would say that practicing the juice is worth the squeeze, right? So it's definitely worth doing here.
I
So
love it. Practice makes improvement. That's how I look at it, my friend. But you're right. The
indeed.
juice is worth the squeeze. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. But I think when we think about these cyber threats, we've got like, well, perfect storm, the hurricane forming in the southeast. So we got people
Yeah.
from all over. Hope everyone's staying safe for that. Didn't mean to play
Likewise.
on current conditions here, but we have a set of conditions with explosive amounts of data. I've heard 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. There's
Yes.
zettabytes everywhere. There's multi-cloud strategies. There's hardware refreshes and vendor
Hmm. Hmm.
sprawl. Yet we're seeing basically 1 out of 4 organizations are had to pay a ransom, right? So it's like, IT is a lot harder than it used to be. And I like
Got
to
that
just
right.
sum all this up that digital transformation is real.
You got all that right. And the funny thing is, in IT becoming way more complex today than it was many years ago, you also take into consideration that there are many companies that are still leveraging legacy systems. And for one reason or another, they can't make that shift as, to make the necessary advances. And then that creates that, I love the title, the perfect storm of complexity. That adds to that perfect storm, which makes the need to be ransomware resilient all that much more important for organizations like that.
Yeah. And so I think that resilience conversation, what I think is very practical advice, and I don't have a slide here, but I'm just full of practical advice.
Yeah.
One point I want to hide out to people is you got to think end to end. You got to think about, like, for example, I just learned a very good trick, and that is hide your cybersecurity insurance policy, right? So that the threat actors don't pick that up and, say, hey, well, you have a $2 million ransom, but we're only going to charge you, 1.9 because you have a policy for $2 million or
$2
something
million.
like that.
Yeah. Mm.
So it's like really think about preparing, again, back to that preparation, preparing to deal with some of the threats that we have in front of us. And I want to introduce everyone to a mindset. Now, zero trust is a great framework that came out of the networking space. I and Hitachi Vantara and I really are going to go down this path of zero trust data resilience, or ZDR, as I like to say. But David, I'd say this zero trust mindset is a very good way to start the resiliency conversation.
It is, and it's unfortunate. There's a lot of I'll trust and then verify still happening today, and that is it's. I don't understand why that still exists. It's baffling my mind.
Well, I think that really feels like organizations putting a lot of extra faith in things like complex passwords or multi-factor authentication. But ZTDR, or zero trust in principle form, really on the I guess that's purple. I'm kind of colorblind at the top. Assuming breach, using least privilege access, and verification explicitly of really all of the traffic that matters. And again, back to my juice is worth the squeeze comment. One thing I'll say is that I feel that putting, especially in the bottom left, separation of backup storage and backup software, that is a perfect example. Really, all of these immutable, multiple resilience zones, all of that work when you're in an incident, when you need your storage and your backup software investments to get you out of a problem. This is absolutely work worth doing. And I'm going to steal a question here from Alan. One of the most,
seen it as well.
Yeah, Alan has one of the most. What are some of the most prevalent problems when organizations scale their resilience, and how can they be addressed? I'm going to give one answer to Alan's question, and that's consistency. I see a lot of inconsistency, especially if people have acquired companies. They're doing it differently over here. They got the resilience game good here, but you know what? The threat actors only need one chance to get it right, and they'll go to those inconsistencies. Any piece of advice?
And I'll add something to what you just said, because we're in an environment where there's a lot of, I'm using the term, hyper merger and acquisition activity. And if you're unable to get the word that you use, consistency, going, as the organization that's the parent that's doing the merger or doing the acquisition, you may be already wholesome. But then when you bring in that, because it's the third party company that you're bringing in isn't properly vetted, that then establishes that weakness for you. And then you're right back to where you were at the very beginning. So the consistency, I'm happy that you said that, Rick. It is consistency that's lacking.
Yeah, and I'll build off of Alan's next question and just say, really equating DR with a cybersecurity incident, because there are actually plenty of conditions where it meets the same criteria. I actually even heard of a financial crisis requiring the DR principles to be enacted and things like that. So Alan, that would be the role of DR that I would also offer as well. But ZTDR, this is the way. I'm harnessing my inner Mandalorian here, that this is the way into the future. And I think it's a great place to start. And we're going to walk through that. And, when I look at another question came in. Paul. Oh, boy.
Yes, that's a very good question, and I think it ties back in that bottom half of the slide that we're looking at, especially on the immutable backup storage. There's a lot of stuff that we could sit here for quite a while and talk about that one for Paul.
Yeah, Paul is asking about the CrowdStrike incident during the summer. How are these joint solutions helping us to prevent situations like that? Paul, I will tell you, there were several Veeam customers who got out of that problem relatively easy due to high-speed recovery, which is kind of why you go to backup. And storage can play a very big part of high-speed recovery, which is, Paul, great segue to our next topic. So here's just one look at a resiliency solution and what you could think about some of the different components. And Veeam and Hitachi Vantara have been partners for a long time. In fact, David and I were chatting. True story. I think I go farther back with Hitachi than David, because I was a special guest of Hitachi when the VSP was launched in 2010, virtual storage platform, and then HCP, the content platform. These are true enterprise class storage systems, David, and I think, unified storage across the whole object file block. I mean, if there's a storage need, there's a Hitachi product to get it done.
That's true.
Yeah. And so I think immutable is a great place to start here. First of all, what does immutability mean? My backup data definition is a restore point, a backup written on generally object storage, and it can't be modified. It is a word. I've had people ask me if immutability even is a word. It is. But I think it's kind of a table stake in the resiliency conversation nowadays, David.
It is a huge thing, and it ties in, and I'm seeing a question here that Alan had put back saying around the discussion of the role of disaster recovery within cyber resilience and how Veeam and Hitachi contribute to that. That actually ties back in with this that we're looking at here. Now, because we see resilience being so important, and having that ability to not only have the technology from the software side, but also from the hardware side work together, I think Veeam and Hitachi have come up with something that would be not only fit for purpose, but fit for the times, if I should say so. Rick, maybe you can give some more illusion around how well Veeam sits on the Hitachi VSP platform.
Yeah, so Veeam is generally storage agnostic. I like to say we would partner with everybody, including the power company, if it made sense. But there's a difference especially when we look at some of the different, if I go into this slide, some of the different storage capabilities. And I want to draw your attention to the left, snapshots. So modern storage systems have high performance, low impact storage snapshots on the primary storage, but also secondary storages and more. And if we look at a DR site, for example, there's those snapshots there as well. And to Alan's second question, and just the whole mindset of a disaster, having two things. You have the storage snapshot that's a high-speed recovery technique off-site, but it's also separated from the, let's just call the Veeam part, the backup management plane. And then whether it's VSP or HCP, that is like the backup storage control plane. And there's like very distinct actual benefits of that. So if we talk ZTDR, David, I'm preparing for the threat actor to get on the Veeam server and intend to do damage. But with the nature of object storage that's immutable, with the nature of snapshots being written on a different storage array, the threat actor cannot impact the ability to recover. And I think that's a resiliency high bar that I think organizations need to realize is very attainable today.
And not only is that a high bar, but from a regulatory perspective, and Alan is actually asking about that as well, it actually helps to address those regulatory requirements. So when you look at frameworks, particularly, for example, DORA, the Digital Operational Resiliency Act that's coming out of the European Union, that's in layman's terms is basically saying, as an institution, if something were to happen, I'm not waiting for you to do a recovery from your backup and then do the test and start over. I'm literally need you to fail over immediately to something else. So using that DR side example, fail over and continues. It's almost like fail forward and continue, but you got to continue in a way where this now becomes production, and then you can go back into what used to be the production environment and figure out, okay, what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? How did we quickly fix it? And then bring everything back on par, so to speak. So this is how it helps from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah, and I think those are, and then we're right on the heels of NIS2 in Europe as well, yes. And you'll see, you'll see some of the global regulations start to reappear in different forms around the world. So just because most of our audience is in the U.S. doesn't mean that we shouldn't be watching and thinking about these regulatory things as well. But one thing I want to highlight here is, you brought up a point, David, about what went wrong, and you have these great ways. We have these great ways to get out of it. But I want to flip it back to the organization, and I can't win the gift card for best question, I know, but we have to think what could go wrong. And right. I love this notion of separating the backup storage, because we really have everything here. Loss of device, no problem. Got it offsite, got it in object storage. We could say loss of primary infrastructure, no problem. We could recover to other places. By the way, a lot of people don't know this, but Veeam backups stored in any of the places or from a snapshot that you're seeing here, we could restore those backups to a new cluster. We could restore those to the hyperscale public cloud. We could restore those to a different hypervisor. Yeah, we can actually take VMware and recover it to Hyper-V. We can take VMware and recover it to Proxmox or Nutanix and stuff like that. Might be a different conversation. But anyways, we have this absolute portability. But I want to really double down on one very powerful one here, David, and that is around, like, let's gravitate specifically to object storage. So I know that HCP offers object storage. VSP, I think, also has object storage capabilities, as well as the hyperscale public clouds. This one is really important for the resiliency conversation. Veeam has nearly 500,000 customers. If we have organizations putting their backups in a bucket that's immutable, and they have their encryption password, here, this is a powerful one, David. We don't have a record of a support case of an organization unable to recover when they have those two things. So, a solid backup is your most likely choice of getting out of a cybersecurity incident, and having this immutable copy that's ultra portable. I mean, I think it's really, really powerful. And I love just the scenarios, loss of device, loss of site, loss of control plane, any of these types of scenarios, we can solve it with this view right here. Super
And
powerful.
what's cool about that is there are two things, even from a metrics perspective, there are two things that this would help you to, as an organization, achieve. One would be to achieve a high recovery point objective. So now I can be closer to my recovery point at all points in times, given that I have these immutable snapshots. But then more importantly is the time it takes for me to recover. It's a lot faster. Now, Alban had asked a question around what are the metrics or the indicators that you need to focus on. So those would be two, Alban, and everyone else who's listening, that you want to focus on. Your ability to achieve that recovery time objective, but then the ability to have a closer recovery point objective, being able to get closer to the point where the incident actually occurred, so you're not losing a lot of time. And then there are other things that would go into it. Your typical, the mean time for you to detect that something went wrong, the mean time for you to resolve it, the mean time for you to contain it, and the list goes on and on. But those are two very important points to take into consideration from a metrics perspective. And I think you brought it out pretty well here with this slide.
Yeah, that's a solid advice, David. And the one thing I'll add to Albin's question is prepare for some of the surprises. At the top, we mentioned minimize attack surface and blast radius. And the blast radius is a very common term when it comes to cybersecurity incident response. A lot of times you don't know what that is exactly. And the other big surprise that can happen, Albin, is out of nowhere. Cybersecurity law enforcement comes in and takes control over an infrastructure. And this is a scenario that a lot of organizations maybe didn't foresee happening. And there's a lot of reasons why. Maybe the infrastructure teams aren't talking to the cybersecurity teams enough. But I will tell you, in a ransomware incident, the cybersecurity team likely will own the response and then work with the infrastructure teams to get out of the problem. That being said, Albin, this metric or indicator, the one surprise element I would say is, hey, I have my backups, but I can't restore to where I came from. So take this visual here. We have the DR site. Maybe that's what we need to activate the DR site. Maybe we need to pursue cloud. Maybe we need to pursue a different infrastructure. And so my advice, Albin, is really think about a plan A, a plan B, and then also a plan C.
Yeah. Rick, curiosity, what role do you see AI playing in making all of this work today? I mean, AI is the latest innovative buzzword. I'm going to use that word, buzzword. It's the latest buzzword. Everyone is AI, AI, AI. But how is this helping in your estimation? And could you speak a little bit to what Veeam is doing where AI is concerned?
Yeah, so there's 5 distinct Veeam AI storylines. One is what I would call the community and ecosystem kind of play. Like, for example, there's Vanny GPT. Somebody made a custom GPT based out of Veeam knowledge base docs and website content. Another person made a GPT that transcribes YouTube videos, which I got to start watching what I say now, by the way, with that one. The second kind of main area, and that's a good question from Ahmed there, is the second main area is around productized AI. So Veeam right now today has the AI assistant. We have the inline malware detection, which is AI powered, so that when we put data on the 3-2-1 rule, or like this example, we're putting it in free of malware. That's very important because we don't want to propagate malware through the or ransomware's, fingerprints. We don't want to propagate through the recovery zones. And then we've announced a co-pilot capability. That's not out yet, but we've announced it. The third main AI bucket that Veeam is working on is around our customer experience. A lot of customers don't know that when they upload our logs, that gets put into an AI engine to very quickly identify what could potentially be going on. Fourth bucket is we have a Veeam private AI, a Veeam GPT of sorts, where I use it all the time to make scripts and optimize, text. But our developers also use it to optimize code. But it's a private AI, so it's not leaking out. And then the fifth emerging area, and by the way, it's reasonable to expect you'll see Veeam and Hitachi working together here on this one, is to enable the resiliency of an AI infrastructure. We have seen a lot of environments really struggle with speeds and feeds of doing AI right in their, especially private AI. And a lot of our storage partners are asking us to do stuff around that. So that's a very long answer to your question, but Ahmed, very good one.
But it also highlights the power of the partnership that exists today between Veeam and Hitachi Vantara, because we're leveraging each other, especially where this is concerned. So that, Ahmed, thank you so much for that question, because you were able to drag this out of us. So thank you for that one.
Hey, nothing gets dragged out of me. I got, just as long as I don't go into my jokes, which pregame, I don't know. Jess may never ask me back after that one. But the resilience conversation, David, this is an old school rule, but I love it. I want, if anybody walks out of this session with one thing that they remember, it's the 3-2-1 rule, or I've upgraded it a little bit, the 3-2-1-1 rule, where we have 3 different copies of data on 2 different media, one of which being offsite, and one of those or more being immutable. Yeah, this is a very powerful recipe.
Yes, sir. Indeed.
Um, the one thing I like about the 3-2-1 rule is that it can really address nearly any failure scenario, and it doesn't require a specific hardware. I've seen organizations like go into the fives, like 5 different copies of data when they incorporate their storage snapshots, when they incorporate disk copies offsite. I spoke to one individual, works for a national government, absolutely paranoid. He has 5 immutable copies. I love the guy for this. Okay. And it's one of those things that honestly, that's pretty important to their country. And it's a small country too. So they have sovereignty concerns, but they can't go, thousands of miles away to store this data. So it's really interesting how this 3-2-1 rule can really allow you to hit your resiliency levels, but also not be overly prescriptive. So again, it's like layers. The threat actor has all these layers to get through. And then when we incorporate immutability, on box 2, for example, let's take a block storage resource. One example is the Veeam hardened repository, which is a Linux system that puts Veeam backups on block storage with immutable attributes. Very, very good stuff. In fact, if you go to community, for those on the webinar, if you go to community.veeam.com, we have a special community preview where you can play with the ISO to automatically configure that. Very, very fun stuff. But then also that other copy on immutable storage. So take HCP, for example. You can have, proven enterprise class storage with VSP and HCP, 2 different immutability control planes. And what I really like is that if you lost the entire Veeam infrastructure, all you have is the bucket in HCP, or all you have is the share on the VHR, right, on the VSP, you can drive complete recovery.
That's right.
Fantastic.
Curiosity for you. I'm just throwing this out there because, just for those who may be listening, is this only limited on block? But what about file and what about object?
Fair shout. So Veeam can work with all of this. NFS, the SMB, iSCSI Fiber, FCOE, all these bizarre storage protocols. Yeah, sure, we can do that. But the immutability, or what I like to say, the ultra resilient copies of backup data, that right now is limited to object storages. So S3 compatible, which HCP can do. And we can also do the Veeam hardened repository on block with the with Linux, a Linux system with directly provisioned storage, and that would be immutable file attributes, usually on the XFS file system. So if I had to make a recommendation to someone, first meeting, it would be something like this: the VHR on-prem, an object storage offsite, or get in, if you're an enterprise, you've got sites with similar hardware, start crossing each other where HCP holds the object storage of the first site on the second site, and then the first site holds the backups of the second site on HCP with immutability on both. Flexibility becomes super important here. Veeam's never going to be overly prescriptive. And likewise, take a storage platform like VSP and HCP. They are flexible for whatever you may need. And I think that organizations need that flexibility today. When you think of the resiliency layers across an enterprise, I think that's just what the market needs today.
Okay. So I have a question for you. And I'm trying to tease up something here. We typically look at the immutability snapshots, the immutable snapshots from the perspective of, I do a backup, I want to be able to recover, but I want to ensure that what I'm going to recover, no one has the opportunity to change it. So we tend to look at it from that perspective. But are there other use cases where this would come out really, really well that goes beyond traditional backup recovery, but still fits into the remit of resilience? And I'm thinking now along the lines of, say, software updates, patch management, or even the case that we got called out on with Paul with the CrowdStrike situation.
Yeah, in fact, that's a very good setup. I'm going to use part of this slide deck here, or this individual slide. I want to highlight the top section here, the backup from storage snapshots, or I'm sorry, the very bottom one, the on-demand sandbox for storage snapshots. Now, true story, David, this is why I joined Veeam. Some of the magic that Veeam starts doing with the data under management by the storage system really can unlock some very powerful benefits for organizations. So the on-demand sandbox takes these VSP snapshots, turns them on in an isolated environment to allow someone to test application updates, security updates, test a malicious script, do penetration testing there. Don't do it on production, things like that. Yes, exactly. It's like a cyber range, lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, once they get their head around this on-demand sandbox, this can solve some real problems. This can save you some real amounts of time in your scheduled maintenance time that you're doing as an admin, because I've got nothing but stories of this technology paving the way for organizations to just run a better IT service. One quick story. Everyone has these applications that drive them crazy in their environment. I'm sure we all do. Yes. And I was debriefed of a scenario where an insurance company had this application, and it was very fragile. Mm-hmm. But the security team's like, hey, this system is at risk for SQL injection or something very bad like that.
Yes.
And the security team wanted to do an active test on the production system, but it's like, that's kind of dangerous. The app is very fragile. They took it to this on-demand sandbox and provisioned it for the security team, and they actually found, yes, it was vulnerable. But what they further did is reinstantiate that sandbox, and then they were able to apply the vendor patches that they honestly weren't able to know if they would work, and they did work, and it blocked that vulnerability, which was good. But the real gold, David, was they said when they go back to their change control board, hey, yes, we know that this update takes 2 hours to do. We did it off of last night's backup, and it was successful, and we tested it. We are going to ask for 3 hours to do the update in production, even though we know we only need 2. And they were very well prepared to just up the resiliency of that organization's fragile application because of those on-demand storage snapshot sandboxing. This is an absolute differentiator for organizations just to prepare for things, much less the one above it, the Explorer for storage snapshots, that high-speed recovery technique.
Right.
This is good stuff.
And that's the reason why I teased it out, because again, to go back to something that we both alluded to at the top of the call, both of us are football maniacs, and you said it, and I said it too. Practice. There's a reason why the teams keep practicing over and over and over again. Practice actually does make improvement, and being able to do this is a huge value sell. The ability, the fact that you're able to take the snapshot and then take that into some kind of sandbox environment and work on that independently, just to see what happens if I try to break it. What happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? Get the results that you're looking for, and then be able to quickly pivot and fix in production before something goes wrong. I think that is the biggest value sell for me, if I were back in my life as a regular customer, this for me would be the holy grail. This would be it for me.
The last important point I would highlight for people using Veeam and VSP together, it will take you 3-4 hours to understand this technology. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It will be a small investment, but I guarantee you that time that you take to learn this technology will more than pay for itself in saved change hours at night. Kind of the worst thing to do is ask for another change request, right? You have this way to simulate anything you may need. And then my other favorite, it's hard to pick one, the top of the list, the backup from storage snapshots. This is a great way to kind of remove barriers of backup windows. I see organizations taking recovery point objectives and the minutes instead of the days or the hours. And got a question just came in from Amir asking about, welcome, he's also from Canada. His question is, multi-tenant world, is there a data protection story for the MSP? Absolutely, Amir. And there are tons of partners using Hitachi out there. Veeam has a whole separate program for multi-tenancy backup, managed backup solutions. That's not really end user focused, but check out our Veeam Service Provider console. The real short story, Amir, is that it uses Veeam backup and replication to do the backup, but it manages with an additional layer that's multi-tenant. So yes is the answer. All right. Yeah, powerful stuff here. These are difference makers is the real takeaway.
They are. That's the real takeaway. Yeah.
And then when I look at the storage snapshots back in managing across a different set of infrastructures, this is kind of a different view of the orchestration and the backup from a storage snapshot. A lot of times organizations don't realize how powerful a storage snapshot can be for them. I'm full of my stories. I got one really quick one. This was a healthcare provider in North America. And this was the classic example, infrastructure team, not talking to the cybersecurity team, not talking to the storage team. They were in the middle of a ransomware incident. Every worst practice they followed. Same username for everything, no 3-2-1 rule, nothing immutable. And we're literally at the end of ideas here with this organization. And then our support team just kind of said, oh, by the way, what are you using for storage? And they mentioned the name of the product, and it had the storage snapshot capability. And our support team said, are you using the storage integration? Veeam customer said, what's that? It's like, well, can you get the storage person on the phone for me? Well, it turns out the storage array, and many arrays do this, they have a default snapshot schedule. Just make something up every 4 hours for 2 weeks or something like that. Turns out they had a default snapshot schedule, and they had no clue that this was a recovery technique. They went back to, the time before the threat actor behavior was noticed, basically recovered everything, basically instantly out of luck. And I think that luck should never be part of the plan. But just to give you an example, the storage snapshot saved that healthcare provider's data, and they were almost at the end of days. And I think that having awareness of this, David, just the power of a storage snapshot can truly make the difference.
So, now that you said that, you have me thinking about something. In your mind, or rather in your professional opinion, what would be the right cadence or frequency for the snapshots? Obviously, it's going to vary as you go industry by industry, company by, but what do you think would be the right cadence? The timing? Every hour, every 2 hours, every 30 minutes?
Without too much discovery, and then I'm going to assume that a backup is also taken at an absolute minimum of every 24 hours. I would probably gravitate between 2 and 4 hours on the snapshots, and honestly holding that for about a week or so without too much discovery. That would be my kind of blanket recommendation. And that's from a resiliency perspective. That's not a storage IOPS perspective. I mean, there's experts at Hitachi Vantara that can help you with that. But that's kind of the resiliency thought. And then if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, that sounds great. Well, how do I get that? My thought is go talk to your business, your application owners, and say, hey, wouldn't this be great? Can you go with me to the CFO to ask to help justify the investments to get this done? Because IT asking in a vacuum doesn't go very far. So,
and there's a reason why I threw that question out there, because this is why the teams have to talk to each other, because you have to be able to understand, what does the business unit require? What's the requirement? And that's going to drive what happens next. So if you get that conversation going amongst all the teams, then you can narrow the field down to, okay, here's the medium or the median number that I need to work with, because this is fit for purpose for the organization. So that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, and I think we could even get into like some t-shirt size menus. You could have a base level of protection, a medium level of protection, and a high end level of protection. And we don't have a storage integration with Hitachi here, but I will tell you the VSP is a platform ready for it. But Veeam has continuous data protection. So that could be yet another layer of resiliency that orgs can add to the fold. And let's take a look at, what that. So I recommended 2 hours as you throw a number out. Here's what 1 hour would look like. And by the way, it's anchored by the backups.
Right. Correct.
Regular backups. And I think that having these additional recovery points, take that example of the healthcare provider that almost lost it all. They basically found a couple days before and they went with 2 p.m. and they were good. But not every story ends that way. But again, you're here, you're listening to this content, you're listening to the right advice, you're taking the right first steps to get there. But I think that the RPO, that recovery point objective, it's important to know that the nightly backup is on a different storage. The hourly snapshot is on the primary storage.
Right, correct. Now, curiosity from my snapshot, do I have? We're talking about resilience at scale here. But from a granularity perspective, can I get granular and grab anything, anytime out of my snap?
So right now, today, it's VMware snapshot integration, and we can pull the whole system. We can pull application items. We can pull virtual disks, and we can pull files within that virtual machine. If you're using other platforms like Physical or Hyper-V and such, you can do all of that and more, but just not from a storage snapshot. But 80% plus, even with the current conditions, 80% plus of the data center estates that I'm looking at are VMware. So, and then the one other thing I'll say is that it's reasonable to expect that Veeam is going to enhance what we're doing with some of the other storages. Because I'm live in public, I can't tell you any more. But there's that. I don't want to get in trouble. I want to be asked back. I mean, working with Jess is fun, so we'll see. So here is a look. See if I got it right. I got app items. I got whole system.
Yes,
so we went granular with the 4 database app types. So Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, Active Directory, and Oracle. Yeah, I think we might even be adding some of those eventually to it. But kind of the thought here is being able to pull out individual items. And the best part here is that when we pull it from a snapshot, the snapshot stays there. It doesn't get like re-promoted back to production. You don't have to worry about stuff getting re-inventoried and messing up your production estate. It's very easy to do. And it stays kind of in the snapshot tree. And you can go back, you can go forward. You don't need the most recent only. Again, remember that org that almost lost everything, but that was saved by them. So yeah, this is really powerful stuff. And one more skim of questions here. I think we got Amir's. His was the last one.
I think his was the last one, which we answered. You know, what I love about this is at the end of the day, this is a better together story. I mean, we're looking at 2 organizations that are really great on their own, but then when they're conjoined or combined, they deliver such great value. And, you know, I got to say, I'm really super grateful for the partnership that we have with Veeam. And no doubt the same that you feel, the partnership that you have with us.
So, yeah, like I've been a Hitachi fan even before I joined Veeam, David. Like I said, I was a special guest when they launched the VSP in Odawara, Japan. It was actually hilarious because we couldn't talk about it because it was pre-launch. So all I did was take pictures of the food and share that on Facebook and Twitter and the like, because couldn't talk about it, but really happy to see where we are with it right now. And with that, turn it back over to Jess to see what we have additionally in questions.
Now I want to go back and look at all your food photos. This sounds great. I would follow that.
Yeah. There were 2 categories, yums and yucks. There was no middle, Jess.
Oh, that's brilliant. See, now that's food influencing that I could get on board with, because when you get too into the weeds with it, you lose me. Like, I don't really know what
Best
mouthfeel
thing
is.
was a
But
fish cake. I'm telling you, that
yeah,
was fantastic. Oh,
that was a yum.
that was a yum. That was dessert even.
Ugh.
Yeah.
See, I don't like seafood. That'd be a yuck for me.
I
That's
don't
a
know. Go be brave. You kind of have to.
fair. Okay. Well, you guys have given us so much to think about, not just our upcoming dietary desires. Now I'm just hungry for lunch, Rick. But I also feel like I need to brush up on my football stats every time I talk to you. I am behind in my, my updates, but so much great information. Thank you guys for that. We do have a ton of questions coming in. We are getting pretty close to the end of time, so I think we're going to have to kind of start wrapping things up. Yeah, we have the yums and yucks are popular. That's going over well.
Yes, it
Well,
is.
you have to post where do we find that, Rick?
Oh, just go Rick Vanover on Facebook. Go to 2010. I put my Facebook public, but like, don't shame me for having a bad camera quality back in 2010. That was 14 years ago. I just asked for some grace. So
we can't judge anybody's past posts. That's unacceptable. We all have to give grace for that, for our youthful camera. I was going to say indiscretions, but hopefully more technology.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into some questions here. One of the questions that I just want to hit on that just came in is wondering about if there's any limitations on storage infrastructure that we should know about.
Yeah, I'm going to spin Stephen's questions. We actually do, Stephen, have a lot of clients in the media space. That's a very large data profile. And then also it's not really subject to storage efficiencies in the traditional sense, because rich media has gone through codecs to become efficient. But Stephen, take the Veeam challenge. I bring it on is my take. I've the largest media companies that are on cable services and things like that, they're Veeam clients and doing just fine. So I don't see any limits on that. I mean, David, I think rich media, I think, does well on modern.
It does absolutely well on the Hitachi infrastructure. And I must say, Stephen, if you want to have a good idea of just how well it could work, take a look at the Sphere out in Las Vegas. That's actually being powered by Hitachi Vantara. So from a storage perspective, so that could give you an idea of just how well it stands up to your large collection of music.
And there's only a few cameras in the world that can capture that cinematic experience that is that place. So,
right.
Rock on.
I just saw little stars come out of Rick's eyes. That's yeah. Cool call out on that.
I love what I do, Jess. I treat every single day like it's the first day on the job, and I bring just a joyful enthusiasm every day, and that type of stuff's fantastic.
I think joyful enthusiasm is exactly where I would peg both of you. And as much as I would love to spend my entire day, Rick, if I could, I would spend my entire day just talking to both of you, and you know that. But we are getting to the end of time, so I'm going to have to start bringing things a little bit to a close. But speaking of joyful enthusiasm, I would like to end this with sort of a final joyful and or enthusiastic thought from each of you. What is one thing, and maybe David, we can start with you, and then Rick, if you can kind of wrap us up. One thing that you'd like everyone in the audience to really have in mind, to be thinking about, to walk away mulling over as they leave our webinar today.
So for me, I'm actually going to take a non-technical approach to that answer. Think of cyber resilience as a journey. It's not a sprint. It's not Usain Bolt trying to get down that 9.58 to go from the 100-meter dash. It's a marathon. It's a continuous thing that requires a lot of effort. It requires, I'm going to go back to what Rick said, consistency in order for you to get this right. So when you're going through your cyber resilience program, it is a program, bear in mind that you can't do this alone, and you've got to come and get the best minds to come sit down and have a chit chat with you to help guide you along that way. So reach across the aisle and come have a conversation with us, have a conversation with Rick, and together we can help you get through this journey, because that's what it is. It is a journey, and it takes everyone to help you get to where you want to go at the end of the day.
Whew, David, you gave me chills on that one. I love that.
Right.
I love that. Tough act to follow, Rick. What do you got for us?
Well, my advice is just practice, meaning be familiar with the unfamiliar. Sometimes you may have heard some people are comfortable being uncomfortable. I recommend organizations, IT pros, practice the scenarios that you don't have to do often. One example, any organization that goes through a cyber incident, one of the things that when they start to see the light, or maybe even earlier, across the board password resets. Now, I know that's a lot of work, but wouldn't that be a lot easier if the org and the IT teams were familiar with that process? Like, I need to do it. Maybe practice some of these things that are the irregular, just so you know how they go. And you're going to have a heap and shed load more confidence to do a response if you're lining up things that you are much more familiar with. If your incident response internally is a collection of steps you've never done before, trust me, you will fall to the level of your preparation. And so that is my advice.
That is wonderful takeaway. A great kind of final thought. And as I've had this feeling with sort of each and every element that you guys have unpacked for us today, that we could really spend about an entire webinar unpacking each piece of this, each element of this. So I think there's a lot more conversation that we need to have here. But this is a great place to end it for now. I'd like to give you've given us some great thoughts to think about. Now let's do a quick action round. Where do we go from here? So I'll ask each of you to chime in and let us know, and we can start out with you again, David. Where does the audience go if they want to jump in, get started, take that first step?
Oh, well, they can come directly to us and just do a quick reach out. So they could hit me directly. My email address is david.green, green spelled like the color, at hitachivantara.com. So you could reach out, engage, and we could start having conversations directly. And then together, working with the rest of my team, I can start to guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, I'd say go to community.veeam.com or even just veeam.com. And I say the community first because that's where all the cool kids hang out. The end users, you can see what does using Veeam look like? What kind of challenges are people having? What kind of ideas are being shared in resiliency? It's all being talked about there. And if you have a question, I guarantee you're going to get an answer very soon. We have every day somebody asks a question and you come back 2-3 hours later, you got five replies. So it's a safe place to up your resiliency game over at community.veeam.com.
Well, that's fantastic. Those are some great action steps. Okay, Rick, I'm throwing a curveball at you. I am going to ask you to send us off with a dad joke.
A dad joke? Holy buckets. Well, I already told you one, but I guess I'm going to have to, give a public safety warning here. It's been brought to my attention that there's a bird flu running around, and I want everyone to really, truly take care. But if you have any symptoms, you need to go seek treatment immediately.
Dun, dun, dun. Yes. That's a good one, Rick. I love it.
That's I love it. Tweetment for all. Now, all of you, please take that jokes onto your subsequent meetings today and blame Rick for that one. Well done, my friend.
Never coming back, Jess. I think I'm doing.
Ben says, "Wow." But you also got a yum on the overall session. So that's that. We're gonna take that on balance, right?
You know what? Come back next month. We'll do better.
All right. Well, there you go. Everyone come back and join us again for future dad jokes and as well as lots of great learning. David and Rick, thank you so much for being here. What a great session.
Cheers.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us. Cheers.
All right. And to everyone out there that is asking questions, hey, if you have your own dad jokes that you want to post them now. We got a minute left to wrap, so get those dad jokes in. If you think you can beat Rick at the dad joke game, we want to hear from you, or mom jokes, whatever you got. We want to hear from you. So send those on in. But I do also want to say, as you're getting those questions in, make sure that if you have that kind of lingering thought that you haven't gotten into the questions tab yet, we are going to make sure that everyone gets sent over to Hitachi Vantara and Veeam. So you will get responses back. So make sure you get those questions in. Also visit the handouts tab. We have some incredible resources for you. There is a really cool solution brief, Scale Your Strategy for Cyber Resilience with Hitachi Vantara and Veeam. It's got insight into the overall issues that we covered today, key environmental factors you should be aware of, covering the solution itself, as well as use cases, all the good things. There's also Zero Trust Data Resilience with Hitachi Vantara and Veeam. This is an easy read. It's really going into detail how you can establish that Zero Trust architecture with these two wonderful partners that we've been chatting with here today. So make sure that you've got both of those downloaded, hold on to them, revisit them along with your dad jokes. This is the information that you can bring to your conversations that you're having with all of your teammates later in the day today, because I know you're going to want to tell them everything about this incredible webinar. I know I'm still buzzing and lit up and excited. There's just been so much that we've covered and so much that we've explored together today. Speaking of excitement, I think it's about time that we get into our $250 Amazon gift card, which is going to win a lucky winner here who is live and present at the webinar. And that special someone, in addition to all this fun content today, winning a $250 Amazon gift card is Guy Cario from Colorado. Guy Cario from Colorado. Congratulations to you, Guy. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap the webinar. All right, my friends. Well, with that, I'm going to have to leave it there. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Veeam and Hitachi Vantara for making this whole wonderful, incredible, sparkly webinar possible. What a great day. A big thank you to Rick and to David for guiding us through such an interesting conversation. And of course, my biggest high fives, my biggest and sparkliest of gold stars go to all of you out there with us today for making this discussion possible. I have to say, your questions were just amazing. Everyone was chiming in. We got lots of follow-up discussion, and it's so wonderful when we have speakers that are willing to kind of take things on the fly and dig in and go down the rabbit holes with you, because as Rick said at the end, and I think this is really important, taking every day as if it's his first day on the job. We had two speakers here with us today who genuinely love what they do, who are so passionate about what they do. And you all got to engage and ignite that passion today. And I'm hoping that that spark is carrying back with you as you go on about your days, because this is just step one. This is just the opening conversation. And then you get to go out and carry that information forward and keep having those interesting and engaging discussions, and then hopefully taking action and building that resiliency in your organization. So very excited to see where all of you go from here. I hope that I get to see you all at a webinar again soon. And until then, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful end to your day. Thanks all.